I gave her everything, my savings, my heart, my trust. She told me I was different, that I was her future. $400,000 later, I realized I was just another ATM, and the worst part? I just didn't want to believe them. 5 years after Margaret died, I couldn't take the silence anymore. The house in Geelong felt like a tomb. Every room echoed with her absence, the kitchen where she used to hum while cooking, the garden she'd spent years perfecting, the bed that was too big for just me. I'd wake up reaching for her and find nothing but cold sheets. My kids tried at first. Phone calls on Sundays, awkward visits at Christmas. But they had their own lives, their own families. I was just the sad old man who couldn't move on. My mates from work would invite me to the pub, but I'd sit there nursing a beer while they talked about grandkids and weekend plans. I had nothing to contribute, nothing to look forward to. I was 67 years old with $450,000 from selling the house and absolutely no reason to wake up in the morning. Then one night, I'm at the RSL club and this bloke named Terry starts talking about Thailand. He'd been going there for years. Cheap living, warm weather, beautiful beaches, people who smiled at you on the street. He showed me photos on his phone. Crystal blue water, temples with gold roofs, markets bursting with color. He said you could live like a king on $1,000 a week. More importantly, he said, you could start over, be someone new. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Terry said. Start over. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I booked a one-way ticket to Phuket, put the rest of my furniture in storage, and told my kids I needed some time away. They didn't argue. I think they were relieved. The flight was long. 13 hours of recycled air and bad movies. But when I stepped off that plane into the humid Thai night, something shifted in my chest. The air smelled like flowers and grilled meat. The airport bustled with energy. People laughing, families reuniting, taxi drivers calling out in broken English. I felt more alive in that moment than I had in 5 years. I found a small condo near Patong Beach. Nothing fancy, just a studio with a balcony overlooking the street. The landlord was a tiny Thai woman who barely spoke English but smiled so wide I couldn't help but smile back. She charged me 12,000 baht a month, about 500 Australian dollars. I paid her 6 months up front in cash and she looked at me like I'd given her the moon. The first few weeks were good. I'd wake up without an alarm, walk down to the beach, have breakfast at a little cafe that served terrible coffee but amazing pad thai. I'd spend my days reading on the sand, swimming in water so warm it felt like a bath, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. At night, I'd wander through the markets, trying strange fruits, practicing my broken Thai with vendors who found my accent hilarious. I felt lighter. The weight of grief that had been crushing me for years started to ease. But then the loneliness crept back in. The expat bars were full of men my age, sure, but they all seemed to be playing a game I didn't understand. They'd sit there with young Thai women draped over them, buying rounds of drinks, telling stories that got louder and more unbelievable as the night went on. I'd watch them and feel empty. This wasn't what I came here for. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake, if maybe I was too old, too broken, too stuck in my grief to ever feel whole again. I'd sit on my balcony at night, listening to the street noise below. What would she say if she could see me now? Probably tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself. She never had patience for self-pity, but she wasn't here. No one was. I was alone in a country where I didn't speak the language, surrounded by people but more isolated than ever. Some nights I'd think about booking a flight home, going back to Geelong, finding a small flat, living out my days in quiet desperation. At least it would be familiar desperation. But something kept me here. Some stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. I just had no idea how. It was a Tuesday morning, about 2 months after I'd arrived. I was sitting at my usual spot at a beachside cafe, drinking my 3rd cup of terrible coffee and pretending to read a book I'd found in a hostel's free library. The place was quiet, just me, the owner behind the counter, and the sound of waves crashing on the beach across the road. Then the door opened, and she walked in. I noticed her immediately, Not just because she was beautiful, though she was. Tall for a Thai woman, long black hair, wearing a simple yellow dress that somehow looked elegant. But it was more than that. It was the way she moved. Confident, easy, like she belonged everywhere she went. She ordered something in Thai, laughing with the owner like they were old friends, then looked around for a seat. Her eyes landed on me. "Is okay I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair at my table. The cafe was half empty, but I nodded anyway, too surprised to speak. She sat down, pulled out her phone and a book. English book, I noticed. Some romance novel with a sunset on the cover. She caught me looking and smiled. "You like reading?" she asked. Her English was accented but clear. I held up my book, some thriller about spies I wasn't really following. "Trying to," I said. "Not doing a great job of it," she laughed. A real laugh, not polite. "Me too. I read same page 3 times now." We both laughed then, and just like that, we were talking. Her name was Wara, short for Wara porn, she told me, but everyone called her Wara. She was 30 years old, from Phuket originally, worked at one of the big resorts up the coast. Housekeeping management, she said with a little pride in her voice. She was saving money to help her family. Her parents still lived in a village north of the city. She asked about me and I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone. About Margaret, about how I couldn't stay in Australia anymore, about feeling lost. She listened, really listened, not with that glazed look people get when they're waiting for their turn to talk. She leaned forward, asked questions, touched my hand once when I talked about Margaret's last days in the hospital. "That very sad," she said softly. "You must love her so much." I had to look away because my eyes were burning. We talked for 3 hours. The owner had to come over twice to ask if we wanted anything else. Wara ordered more coffee, insisted on paying. "You guest in my country," she said when I tried to argue. "I take care of you." When she finally said she had to go to work, I felt panic rise in my chest, like I'd found something precious and it was slipping away. "Can I see you again?" I asked, trying not to sound desperate. She smiled, wrote her number on a napkin. "Of course. I like talking with you. You different from other Farang." That word, Farang, foreigner. Usually, when Thai people said it, I felt like an outsider. When she said it, it sounded almost affectionate. I walked back to my condo in a daze. The sun was hot on my face, but I barely noticed. I kept replaying the conversation, the way she'd laughed at my terrible jokes, the warmth in her eyes when she talked about her family. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a beer I didn't drink, staring at her number. What was I doing? She was 30. I was 67. She was beautiful and kind and full of life. I was a grieving old man with a beer gut and sunspots. This was ridiculous, but then I thought about how she'd looked at me. Not through me, like most people did. At me, like I mattered, like I was still a person worth knowing. I picked up my phone and typed out a message. "I'd love to see you again." I stared at it for 10 minutes before hitting send. Her reply came back in 30 seconds. "Me too. Tomorrow?" I read that message 20 times before I finally went to bed. For the first time since Margaret died, I fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Wara met me at the same cafe. She was wearing jeans and a white shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Somehow she looked even more beautiful than the day before. "I have day off," she said. "I show you real Phuket, not tourist Phuket." We took her motorbike, me clinging to the back like a scared child while she navigated through traffic that should have killed us 10 times over. She took me to a beach I'd never seen before. No hotels, no beach chairs, no vendors selling sarongs. Just white sand and clear water and a handful of local families having picnics. We swam. We talked. She taught me some Thai words and laughed when I butchered them. "Your tone all wrong," she'd say. Then repeat the words slowly while I tried again. "Better. Still wrong, but better." Later, she took me to a market in the old town. Not the night market I'd been to, but a local place where grandmothers sold vegetables they'd grown and men carved fish at stalls dripping with ice. Wara knew everyone. She'd stop and chat in rapid Thai. introducing me as her friend. They'd smile and shake my hand and sometimes offer me samples of food I couldn't identify. I ate everything she gave me, even when I wasn't sure what it was. She seemed delighted by this. "Most Farang too scared," she said. "They want pizza and French fries. You brave." I wasn't brave. I was just happy. She held my hand as we walked through the market, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart hammered in my chest. When was the last time someone had held my hand? Margaret's funeral, probably. My daughter, leading me away from the grave. We ended up at a small temple on a hill. The sun was setting, casting everything in gold light. Wara showed me how to light incense, how to bow properly to the Buddha statue. "You make wish," she said. I closed my eyes. What did I wish for? I wished this wasn't temporary. I wished I could feel this way forever. When I opened my eyes, she was watching me with a soft expression. "Good wish?" she asked. "The best," I said. She smiled and took my hand again. We sat there until dark, not talking, just being together. When she dropped me back at my condo, she kissed my cheek. "Thank you for good day," she said. I wanted to tell her I should be thanking her, that she'd given me something I thought I'd lost forever, but I just smiled and said, "Tomorrow?" The days blurred together after that. We saw each other every time she wasn't working. Sometimes we'd go on adventures, exploring temples and waterfalls and hidden beaches. Sometimes we'd just sit at the cafe and talk for hours. She told me about growing up poor in Phuket, how she'd worked since she was 14 to help her family, how she dreamed of opening her own small hotel one day. I told her about my years as an electrician, the houses I'd wired, the time I'd nearly electrocuted myself. She'd gasp and hit my arm. "You crazy man," she'd say, but she'd be smiling. I started paying for everything without thinking about it. Meals, taxis, her phone bill when she mentioned it was overdue. It felt good, being needed, being useful, being the provider again. She'd protest at first. "Barry, too much. You don't have to." But I'd insist. "I want to," I'd say, and I meant it. What was money for if not this? Then one night, we were having dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean. Candlelight, soft music, the works. Wara had been quiet all evening, picking at her food, staring at the ocean. "What's wrong?" I finally asked. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "My sister," she said. "Somjit. She very sick, need operation." My stomach dropped. "What kind of operation?" I asked. She explained something about her stomach, polyps. I couldn't follow all the medical terms in her accented English, but I understood the important part. It cost 80,000 baht, about 3,500 Australian dollars. They didn't have it. Somjit was waiting, in pain, hoping. "I so worried," Wara said, wiping her eyes. "She only 25. What if something happened to her?" I didn't even hesitate. "I'll pay for it," I said. Wara's head snapped up. "What? No, Barry, I cannot ask you." "You didn't ask," I said. "I'm offering. Family is important. Let me help." She stared at me for a long moment, tears still streaming down her face. Then she came around the table and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You are Angel," she whispered. "You saved my sister's life." That night, back in my condo, I transferred the money, 80,000 baht. My bank account barely noticed it, but the way Wara had looked at me, like I'd hung the moon, that was worth everything. I went to sleep feeling like a hero, like I'd finally done something that mattered. A few days later, Keith called me on video. Keith was an old mate from the electrical union, one of the few people from home who still checked in. "How's paradise?" he asked, grinning from my phone screen. He looked old. "When did we all get so old?" "It's good," I said. "Really good, actually." His eyebrows went up. "That so? You sound different, mate. What's going on?" I told him about Wara, tried to keep it casual, but I could hear the excitement in my own voice. How we'd met, how she made me feel, how we spent all our time together. Keith's smile faded as I talked. By the time I finished, he was frowning. How old is she? He asked. 30, I said, defensive. What's that got to do with anything? Keith was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mate, just be careful, yeah? I've heard stories. Blokes going over there, falling for someone, losing everything. I felt anger flash through me. It's not like that, I said. Wara's different. She has a real job, a real life. She's not some bar girl. Keith held up his hands. I'm not saying she is. I'm just saying be smart. You've got a good nest egg. Don't do anything stupid. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation felt strained. When we hung up, I was annoyed. Keith didn't know Wara. Didn't know us. He was just another cynical old bastard who couldn't imagine someone might actually care about me. But later that night, lying in bed, his words kept echoing in my head. Be careful. I pushed the thought away. I was being careful. I was just living my life. Finally, after 5 years of barely surviving, I was living. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The first time I noticed something was off, we were having lunch at a small restaurant near her resort. Wara's phone kept buzzing on the table. She'd glance at it, frown, then flip it face down. After the 5th time, I asked, You need to get that? She shook her head quickly. Just work. Not important. But her hand stayed on the phone, protective. Later, when she went to the bathroom, the phone buzzed again. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But I did. The screen lit up with a message in Thai. I couldn't read the words, but I saw the name, a man's name, and 3 heart emojis. My stomach twisted. When Wara came back, I didn't say anything. I told myself it was nothing. A friend, a relative. The heart emojis didn't mean anything. Different cultures, different uses, right? But after that, I started noticing other things. How she'd disappear for hours without explanation. How she'd say she was with family but come back smelling like cigarette smoke, and she didn't smoke. How her moods would swing wildly. One day, she'd be loving and attentive, holding my hand, telling me she'd never felt this way before. The next day, she'd be cold, distracted, snapping at me over nothing. Why you always ask so many questions? She said once when I asked where she'd been. You, my boyfriend, or my father. I apologized immediately, felt guilty for being suspicious. She softened then, kissed me, said she was just stressed about work. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. Then one afternoon, I saw the notification again. Same name, more hearts. This time Wara grabbed her phone before I could look away. Who is that? I asked, trying to sound casual. Her face went hard. My cousin, she said. Tawan. Why? Your cousin sends you heart emojis? I said, and I could hear the doubt in my own voice. Wara's eyes flashed with anger. Yes, Barry. In Thailand, we close with family. Not like you, Farang. Never talk to anyone. It stung because it was partly true. My kids and I barely spoke. My friends had drifted away. But something about her tone, the way she deflected, made my stomach churn. We didn't talk for the rest of the day. That night, she went home early, said she had a headache. I sat alone in my condo and felt the old loneliness creeping back in. A week later, she asked for more money. We were at the beach, watching the sunset, and she'd been quiet all evening. Barry, she said finally, I need to ask you something. My heart sank. What is it? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. My mother, she said, she have diabetes, need medicine every month. Very expensive. She cannot afford. She wasn't crying this time, just looking at me with those big brown eyes, waiting. How much? I asked. 50,000 baht, 2,000 Australian dollars. I hesitated. For the first time since we'd met, I hesitated. Wara saw it. You don't believe me, she said, and now there were tears. You think I lying, just like everyone else. You think I only want your money. I didn't say that, I said quickly. I've given you quite a bit already, and I'm trying to be smart about my savings. Wrong thing to say. Wara stood up, her face a mask of hurt. I should never ask you, she said. I thought you care about me, about my family, but you just see me like everyone else see Thai girl with old farang. I am not bar girl, Barry. I have pride. She started walking away. I jumped up, grabbed her arm. Wait, Wara, please. I'm sorry. Of course I'll help. I'm scared sometimes that I'm being stupid. She turned, and the hurt in her eyes made me ache. You think loving someone is stupid? She asked quietly. Is that what I am to you? Stupid decision? That night, I transferred 50,000 baht to her account. She thanked me, held me, told me I was a good man. But something had shifted. I felt it, a distance I couldn't bridge. The next morning, Keith called again. I almost didn't answer. How's it going? Mate? He asked. I couldn't lie. I don't know, I said. Good, I think. Maybe. I told him about the money, the mother's medicine. Keith was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Barry, mate, I'm going to be straight with you. This is a scam. I've heard this exact story before. Sick sister, sick mother, always just a bit more money. You're being played. I felt anger surge up. You don't know her, I said. You've never even met her. I don't need to, Keith said. Barry, you're my friend. I care about you, and I'm watching you get taken apart piece by piece. We argued. I told him he was cynical, jealous, couldn't stand to see me happy. He told me I was blind, desperate, making the same mistake 1,000 blokes before me had made. We hung up angry. I didn't call him back, but that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head. 80,000 for the sister, 50,000 for the mother, dinners, gifts, phone bills, taxis. How much had I given Wara? $20,000? 30? I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. This was love. Love meant sacrifice. But Keith's words wouldn't leave my head. You're being played. You're being played. You're being played. I rolled over and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Just doubt. Cold, creeping doubt that wrapped around my chest and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. I decided to pull back. Not end things. Just slow down. Be smarter with my money. When Wara asked me out to an expensive restaurant that weekend, I suggested we cook at my place instead. She agreed, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. The dinner was awkward. She kept checking her phone, barely touched the food I'd made. Finally, I said, Wara, we need to talk about money. She looked up sharply. What about it? I chose my words carefully. I've been generous, I think. Maybe too generous. I need to be more careful with my savings. I'm retired. This money has to last me the rest of my life. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then Wara put down her fork and stood up. I understand, she said, her voice flat. You tired of me now. This always happen. Farang, come here. They have fun with Thai girl. Then they worry about money. That's not what I'm saying, I protested. I just need to be responsible. She grabbed her purse. I go home now. Wara. Wait. But she was already at the door. She turned, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Something cold. When you decide what you want, Barry, you tell me. But I am not toy you play with when you feel like it. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I sat there in my empty condo, the half-eaten meal in front of me, and felt my world tilting. That night, I tried calling her. No answer. I sent texts. Nothing. The next day, the same. By the third day, I was frantic. I drove to her resort, asked for her at the front desk. The receptionist looked confused. Wara porn no work here, she said in broken English. She quit 2 months ago. My blood ran cold. 2 months ago, right around when we met. Why would she lie about having a job? I drove to her condo, the one I dropped her off at dozens of times. Knocked on the door, no answer. A neighbor poked her head out, an old Thai woman with suspicious eyes. Wara not here, she said in Thai. I tried my broken Thai. When back, she shrugged. Myru. Don't know. Maybe not come back. I left my number, asked her to have Wara call me. The woman took the paper but didn't look like she'd follow through. I went home and did something I'm not proud of. I logged into my bank account and looked at every transaction for the past 3 months. Restaurants, hotels, transfers to Wara's account. Gifts I'd ordered online and had shipped to her address. Total damage, 43,000 Australian dollars. I felt sick. Literally sick. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. When I came out, shaking, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and stared at nothing. $43,000 in 3 months. How had I let this happen? How had I been so stupid? I thought about calling Keith, admitting he was right, but I couldn't bear it. Instead, I just sat there as the sun set and the room grew dark. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Wara. I'm sorry for how I act, the message said. Can we talk? My heart leapt, despite everything. I called her immediately. Where have you been? I asked, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. With my cousin, she said. Tawan, the one you see on my phone. He want to meet you. That should have been my warning. But I was drowning and she was offering me a rope. We met the next day at a cafe downtown. Wara was there with a young Thai man. Handsome, probably mid-30s. He stood when I approached, shook my hand with a warm smile. Barry, he said, I hear so much about you. Wara say you good man. We sat, Tawan ordered coffee for everyone, chatted easily about Phuket, tourism, the weather. Then he got to the point. I want to open restaurant, he said. Seafood restaurant near beach. Very good location. But I need investor, someone who understand business. He pulled out papers, diagrams, numbers. It looked professional, legitimate. How much? I asked, even though I knew I shouldn't. $50,000, he said. 50% ownership. You investor, you get money back, plus profit. Wara reached over and took my hand. This good opportunity, Barry. We can build something together. Real future. I looked at her. She looked back with those eyes I'd fallen for in the coffee shop. Hopeful, trusting. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to believe her. To believe this was real. That I wasn't just another lonely old fool. That there was still a future for me that didn't involve dying alone in a studio apartment. I need to think about it, I said. Wara's face fell. Of course, Tawan said smoothly. Big decision. You take time. But Wara was quiet the rest of the meeting. When Tawan left, she turned to me. You don't trust me, she said. It wasn't a question. I do, I lied. I just need to be smart. She stood up. Let me know when you're ready to believe in us, she said. Then she left too. For 3 days, I wrestled with myself. I looked up business records, couldn't find anything about Tawan's restaurant. I tried to research him online. Nothing. Everything in me screamed this was a scam. But Wara wasn't calling, wasn't texting. I was losing her, and the thought of going back to the loneliness, the emptiness, the silent condo and the long empty days terrified me more than losing money. So I made the transfer. 50,000 Australian dollars, nearly 2 million baht, to Tawan's business account. When I told Wara, she cried, happy tears this time. She came over that night, stayed with me, held me like she hadn't in weeks. You not regret this, she whispered. I promise. This, our future now. For 1 week, everything was perfect. She was attentive, loving, present. We made plans, talked about the restaurant opening, about me working there part-time, greeting customers, about building a life together. Then I checked my bank account, my retirement savings, my life's work, everything I'd built over 40 years as an electrician. I was down to $270,000. I'd burned through nearly half my money in 4 months. I sat staring at the screen, the numbers blurring. What had I done? What the hell had I done? I tried to tell myself it was fine, an investment, it would pay off. The restaurant would succeed. I'd get my money back, plus profit. We'd build something real. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I knew the truth. I knew it the moment I made that transfer. I'd just given $50,000 to a man I'd met once based on the promises of a woman who'd already lied to me about having a job. I was 67 years old, and I'd just made the stupidest decision of my life, and I couldn't even admit it to myself yet. Things were good for about 2 weeks after the investment. Wara and I saw each other every day. She talked about the restaurant constantly, showed me photos of the location Tawan had supposedly secured. It looked nice, right on the beach. I started to relax, started to think maybe I'd been paranoid. Maybe Keith and everyone else were wrong. Maybe this was real. Then Wara said she needed to go to Bangkok for a week. Family emergency. Her mother needed her. I offered to come with her. She said no. It was better if she went alone. Thai family business. Hard to explain. I didn't argue. But after she left, the silence of my condo felt different. Heavier. More oppressive. I couldn't sit still. I wandered down to the beach one evening, ended up at a small bar I'd never been to before. The place was quiet. A few tourists, some locals. I sat at the bar and ordered a Singha beer. The owner, an older Thai man with gray hair and kind eyes, came over. "First time here?" he asked in good English. I nodded. "Just moved to Phuket," I said. 6 months ago. We chatted. His name was Niran. He'd owned the bar for 20 years. Used to be a tour guide before that. He asked the usual questions. Where I was from. What brought me to Thailand. Was I enjoying it? I found myself relaxing, talking more freely than I had in weeks. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was the loneliness. But when he asked if I was seeing anyone, I told him about Wara. His face changed. Just a flicker. But I saw it. "Wara?" he asked. "Wara porn from Phuket?" My stomach dropped. "You know her?" Niran was quiet for a long moment. He poured himself a whiskey, drank half of it, then looked at me. "What I tell you now," he said carefully, "you not want to hear, but I tell you as friend, as man who see this happen many times." I gripped my beer bottle. "What do you mean?" he sighed. "Wara, she known around Phuket. She very beautiful, very charming, and she very good at finding farang with money." The world tilted. "No," I said. "You're wrong. She's different." Niran shook his head. "She have boyfriend, Thai man, young. They together 3 years. He know what she does. He okay with it because she bring money home." I stood up, angry now. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know her." Niran didn't argue, just said quietly, "She have tattoo on her hip. Small bird, yes?" I froze. She did. I'd seen it. She said it was a swallow, for freedom. How did he know that? Niran saw my face and nodded. "I sorry, friend. I see her with many men. Always same story. Family need help. Business investment. They give money. She stay until money gone. Then she find new man. Is not personal. Is survival. But you should know truth." I threw money on the bar and walked out. I didn't want to hear any more. Didn't want to believe any of it. I walked for hours, along the beach, through the streets, not seeing anything. My mind was racing. Niran was lying, or mistaken. He'd confused Wara with someone else. That had to be it. But that tattoo, that specific detail, how could he have known? That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Wara's condo, told myself I was just checking. She'd said she was in Bangkok. Her condo should be dark, empty, but the lights were on. I could see them from the street. I parked across the road and sat in my rental car, watching, telling myself there was an explanation. Maybe she'd come back early. Maybe a friend was staying there. At 11 o'clock, the front door opened. A man walked out. Young, Thai, handsome. Wara followed him. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen. They stood by his motorbike, talking. He said something that made her laugh. That laugh I knew, the one she'd used on me 100 times. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss. Long and deep. I couldn't breathe. My hands on the steering wheel were shaking so hard I thought I might crash even though the car was parked. I watched them. Watched her run her fingers through his hair. Watched him say something close to her ear that made her smile. Watched him get on his bike and drive away. Watched her wave, then go back inside. I sat there for another hour. The lights in her condo went out. I still didn't move. Couldn't move. Around 1 a.m, I finally drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that mattered. I went up to my condo, sat on the balcony, and watched the sun come up. All I could think was how stupid I'd been, how blind, how desperate. Neuron was right. Keith was right. Everyone was right except me. I didn't sleep that night. As the sun rose, I sat there making decisions. I could confront her, scream, demand answers, call her every name I could think of, or I could just disappear. Block her number, pack my bags, leave Thailand, and never look back. But I needed to hear her say it, needed to look her in the eye and hear the truth from her own mouth. Around 9 a.m, I sent her a text. Simple, direct. We need to talk. She replied almost immediately. Okay, I come over this afternoon. 4 o'clock, I didn't respond. Just waited. The hours crawled by. I couldn't eat. Couldn't focus. I just rehearsed what I'd say. How I'd ask. Part of me still hoped there was an explanation. Some way this could all make sense. She arrived at 4:15, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair loose. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful. That's what made this so hard. Hi, she said, smiling as she walked in. You okay? You sound serious in text. I didn't smile back, just gestured for her to sit. She did, confusion crossing her face. Barry, what wrong? I took a breath. Are you seeing someone else? The question hung in the air. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, then anger. What? Why you ask that? Her voice was sharp. I saw you, I said quietly, 2 nights ago, at your condo, with a man. I saw you kiss him. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe. But it was gone so fast I almost missed it. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. You spying on me now? She said. That what you do? Follow me around like detective? I wasn't following you, I said, trying to stay calm. You said you were in Bangkok. I drove past your condo and saw your lights on. So I waited, and I saw. Her face hardened. That was my friend, old friend from school. He come visit. Friends don't kiss like that, I said. He Thai, she snapped. You don't understand Thai culture. We more affectionate than you, cold Farang. I shook my head. Don't do that. Don't make me feel crazy for what I saw with my own eyes. She stood up, angry now. You don't trust me. After everything. After all I give you, you still think I am liar. What have you given me? I asked, and I heard my voice rising. I've given you everything. $43,000 in 3 months. Money for your sister, your mother, your cousin's restaurant, and you haven't even been working. You lied about your job. The resort said you quit months ago. Her eyes went cold. You checking on me now too? Going to my work? Answer the question, I said. Why did you lie? She stared at me for a long moment. Then she tried a different tactic. Softness. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. I ashamed, she said. I quit job because they treat me bad. But I not want you think I am poor girl with no job. I want you respect me. I wanted to believe her. God, some part of me still wanted to believe her. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I want my money back, I said. The tears stopped. Just like that. Her face went blank. What money? All of it, I said. The sister's surgery, the mother's medicine, the restaurant investment, all of it. She laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You think that was loan? That was gift, Barry. You give because you love me, because you want to help. I gave it because I thought we were building a future together, I said. I gave it because I believed you, because I thought this was real. She stood up, grabbed her purse. You are stupid, old man, she said flatly. You think young, beautiful women actually want to be with you? You think love is real? You pay for my time. You pay for me to make you feel young again. That is deal. That always been deal. I felt something break inside me. It was never real? I asked, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. She looked at me with something like pity. In beginning, maybe little bit real. You different from other men. You kind. You gentle. I think maybe I could love you. But then you start acting like you own me. Like your money make me your property. So no, Barry. Not real. Not anymore. Maybe never. She walked to the door, her hand on the handle. Then she turned back. You want to know truth? My boyfriend, the one you see. We been together since before I meet you. He know about you. We laugh about you. About how you believe everything. How easy you are. You not special, Barry. You just another lonely old farang with money. And now, money gone, so I gone too. The door closed. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Heard them fade away. I sat there on my couch in the silence of my condo and couldn't move. Couldn't think. The words kept echoing in my head. You are stupid, old man. You just another lonely old farang. Not special. Not special. Not special. How long I sat there, I don't know. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Eventually, the sun set. The room grew dark. I didn't turn on the lights. Just sat there, in the darkness, feeling the weight of what I'd done. What I'd lost. Not just the money, the dignity, the hope, the belief that maybe, just maybe, I could be happy again. All of it gone. And I had no one to blame but myself. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog. I couldn't leave the condo, couldn't eat. I'd sit on the balcony and stare at nothing. Sometimes I'd pick up my phone to call Wara, then remember her words and put it down. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? I gave money to someone who never actually promised to pay it back. I invested in a business that might not even exist. There was no crime here, just stupidity. My stupidity. I checked my bank account obsessively. $270,000 left. Not nothing, but not enough to retire comfortably. Not enough for medical emergencies or long-term care. I'd worked 40 years to build that nest egg, and I'd burned through 40% of it in 4 months. For what? For the fantasy of being loved. I thought about calling my kids, telling them what happened. But the shame was too much. They'd always thought I was smart, capable, the man who fixed things, who solved problems, who took care of the family. How could I tell them I'd been scammed by a woman young enough to be my granddaughter? How could I admit that loneliness had made me this stupid? One night, my phone rang. Keith. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. Yeah, I said. Barry, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I've been trying to call you for weeks. You okay, mate? I laughed. It came out broken. No, I said. I'm not okay. I told him everything. The money. The restaurant. The boyfriend. Wara's final words. Keith didn't say I told you so. He just listened. When I finished, he was quiet. Then he said, Come home, Barry. I don't have a home, I said. I sold it. Then come stay with me and Linda for a while, he said. Get your head straight. Figure out what's next. I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him I was fine. I'd figure it out. But I couldn't, because I wasn't fine. I was broken. Okay, I said quietly. Okay. The next morning, I called the Australian consulate. They were helpful in a bureaucratic way, told me what documents I needed, how to arrange my return. A nice woman named Patricia walked me through the process. She didn't ask questions, didn't judge. I wondered how many calls like mine she got, how many old men calling from foreign countries, trying to figure out how to go home with their tails between their legs. I had 1 more week before my flight. I used it to tie up loose ends. Told my landlord I was leaving. Lost my deposit but didn't care. Sold the few things I'd accumulated. A bicycle, some kitchen equipment. Didn't get much for any of it. On my last night in Phuket, I walked down to the beach, the place where I'd first started to feel alive again. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. I sat in the sand and watched it disappear below the horizon. I thought about Wara, tried to hate her, couldn't. She was just surviving the only way she knew how. In a country where poverty was a prison, she'd found a way out, and I'd been willing collateral damage. I thought about Margaret, wondered what she'd think of all this. She'd probably be disappointed. Not surprised, just disappointed. She always said I led with my heart instead of my head. But sitting there in the sand, watching the last light fade, I realized something. I wasn't angry at Wara. I was angry at myself for being so desperate, so lonely, so willing to believe a beautiful lie instead of facing an ugly truth. I'd come to Thailand running from my grief, thinking I could escape it. But grief doesn't work like that. It follows you. It waits. And if you don't face it, it turns into something worse, desperation. And desperation makes you stupid. I'd lost money, a lot of money, but I'd learned something too, something painful and necessary. I couldn't buy love, couldn't buy happiness, couldn't buy my way out of loneliness. Those things had to come from inside, and I'd spent so long running from myself that I'd forgotten who I even was. The flight home was long, 16 hours of recycled air and bad coffee and time to think. I kept waiting to feel something. Regret, anger, sadness, but mostly I just felt tired. When I landed in Melbourne, Keith was waiting for me at the airport. He looked older than I remembered. We all did. He gave me a hug, took my suitcase, didn't ask questions. His wife Linda had made up their spare room. They treated me like I was recovering from surgery. Gentle, careful, not pushing. I stayed with them for a month. In that time, I did something I should have done 5 years ago. I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Chen. She was probably 50, with kind eyes and a direct way of speaking that I appreciated. I told her everything. Margaret, the loneliness, Wara, the money, all of it. You were grieving, she said. Grief makes us vulnerable, makes us seek connection in unhealthy ways. What happened to you wasn't because you're stupid. It's because you're human. We worked through it. Week after week, the guilt, the shame, the anger at myself. Slowly, things started to shift. I called my kids, had honest conversations for the first time in years, told them about Margaret, about how lost I'd been, about Thailand. They were shocked but supportive. My daughter said, "Dad, we thought you were doing fine. You never told us how much you were struggling." We started talking regularly again. Real conversations, not just surface-level check-ins. I moved into a small flat in Geelong. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a balcony overlooking a park. I started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic electrical skills to apprentices. Started going to a grief support group. Met other people who'd lost spouses, who understood that specific kind of loneliness. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. It's not. I still have days where I think about Wara, wonder what she's doing, if she ever thinks about me, if her boyfriend knows how lucky he is. I still feel the sting of shame when I think about how easily I was played. But I also know I'm different now. Stronger, maybe, or just more honest with myself. I learned that you can't run from grief, can't buy your way out of loneliness, can't expect someone else to fix what's broken inside you. That work has to come from within. It's been a year since I left Thailand. My bank account is healthier. I'm careful now. Smart. I date sometimes. Women my own age, who I meet at the community center or through friends. Nothing serious, just company, coffee, conversation. It's enough. Keith asked me once if I regretted going to Thailand. I thought about it for a long time before answering. No, I said finally. It cost me a fortune and nearly destroyed me. But I needed to learn that lesson. Needed to hit bottom so I could start climbing back up. He nodded. Didn't say anything else. What else was there to say? I'm 68 now. I'm not rich. I'm not happy in that explosive, all-consuming way I felt with Wara. But I'm okay. I'm healing. I'm here. And some days, that feels like enough. Some days, it feels like everything. I think about that last night on the beach in Phuket. The sunset, the waves, the quiet acceptance I felt sitting in the sand. I lost $400,000, but I found something more valuable. I found myself again. And this time, I'm not running.